1.69 GPA. Now let that sink in for a minute, okay? That number was just not a GPA. It was a moment. It was a label. It was a mirror. And if I'm being real, it was something that could have easily become my identity. Because when you are young, numbers start talking to you. Grades start talking to you. People start looking at you through the lens of performance. And eventually, you start looking at yourself that way too. I remember the shame. The shame of not knowing I was capable of more, but not performing like it. The embarrassment of feeling judged by teachers, adults, peers, family, even myself. I remember the confusion, not fully understanding why I wasn't locked in, why I couldn't focus. I felt disconnected, why school felt harder emotionally than it looked academically. And then comes the pressure. The pressure of everyone else doing well and everyone else have already made up their minds about me. The pressure of carrying a label before you even understood yourself. And I know I'm not the only one. Because right now, there are students walking through the hallways, carrying invisible weight every single day. But some are discouraged, some are disconnected, some are angry, some feel unsupported. Some are still immature and still developing emotionally. Some are distracted by survival. Some are carrying trauma nobody sees. Some are struggling silently while adults reduce them to data points. And then see, that's the problem. Because a low GPA may show performance, but it does not show the full person. You see, a test score cannot measure pain. An attendance record cannot fully explain struggle. A discipline referral cannot always translate trauma. You see, there is a difference between being low performing and being lost. There is a difference between being unmotivated and being unseen. You see, there is a difference between a student who does not care and a student who has not yet found a reason to believe. You see, that's why this conversation today matters. Because how many students are walking around with labels that do not tell the whole truth? How many young people are being defined by grades, discipline, records, attendance, test scores before somebody takes the time to understand their story? And how many adults right now are still carrying the shame from a season they survived years ago? How many people confuse the bad chapter with a bad identity? But here's the truth. See, me, Timothy Paul McKinney Jr., went from a 1.69 GPA to earning 3 degrees, 1 bachelor's, 2 masters. From a struggling student to an assistant principal. From being misunderstood to building a platform rooted in truth, culture, education, empowerment, and purpose. And let me tell you something. The transformation was not just academic. It was emotional. It was personal. It was spiritual, because this episode right here is not just about success after failure. It is about what failure can hide. Purpose can be buried under shame. Confidence can be buried under confusion. A calling can be buried under being underestimated. And before people saw the truth behind me, all they saw was that number, 1.69. This is the Truth Meter podcast, rooted in culture and education. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome to the Truth Meter, where culture meets truth and truth meets power. I am your host, Timothy McKinney Jr., better known as T-Mac. And today, the very first episode, this is actually a relaunch of the Truth Meter. This is a part of a bigger vision and dream that I have, folks. We really need Black-owned independent media, and that's what I am. I have what I call the Truth Meter Media Group, and this is the Truth Meter Podcast. We do newsletters. I'm going to have a newsletter that's going to come out, blogs. We're going to do events. We have a whole conglomerate that we are trying to start. So this is just the launch of it. I have a dream and a vision. I'm going to chase it, and I'm just excited. And what we delve into This is what we are. We are about the culture, African American culture. I am an educator, and what we do is we talk about education. We talk about culture, all aspects of the culture, whether it be trending topics, whether it be politics. Yes, because in education, guess what? Education and politics go hand in hand. That's what people do not understand. We're going to be teaching. We're going to do interviews. We're going to report. We're going to give relevant information on things that people need to know, not only in education, but in things that affect the African American culture. So when people say that this is a niche, well, it is, but it's a niche in multiple categories. And so I am so excited to bring this to you all today. But what I want to talk about with this first episode is just my journey into education, because I didn't start. Well, first off, let me say this. I hope that my story can be inspirational to young people in general, but particularly young Black males out there, because if you look at the statistics, and hopefully I can get these statistics and give them to you all via a overlay or what have you. But at any rate, really, you can look them up yourself. In education, young Black males only consist of, I want to say, about 2%. 2% of the education workforce. And me being a Black male, I didn't start off in education. I didn't. But now, obviously I am in administration, and that's all I'll give. I'm not telling you where I'm from, what district I'm in, but that's about as personal as I'll get. But, this very first episode, folks, this is about my journey. This isn't about politics or trending topics. Again, we'll get into that down the line. This is about my journey. A journey, folks, that started off in high school with a 1.69 GPA. You heard that. I'm going to say that so that you hear it again. I started off with a 1.69 GPA, graduated, cumulative. But today, again, I'm in administration, to be particular, an assistant principal. I hold 3 degrees, 2 in education, 1 in communication, which is why I love doing what I'm doing now, getting into podcasting, writing, reading, things of that nature. I was an intervention specialist, so I love working with students with disabilities. But I didn't get here because the road, folks, wasn't smooth. But this episode, what I'm going to talk about is about grit, is about growth. It's about what happens when you believe in yourself and you have a support system. So, this is the truth meter, folks. And today, we're turning the temperature all the way up, because we are going to delve into my personal journey. Now, when I say I had a 1.69 GPA, folks, people look at me like I'm joking. Check this out. I'm giving too much information, but I just had my 30-year reunion, okay? And my classmates didn't even understand what my GPA was, because they understand what field I'm in. But that is because I have grown, not only just as a person, in my career, but intellectually and the things that I have done. And I went and got the transcript, and as sure as my name is Tim, it said 1.69. And people always look at me like I'm joking, like it's a punchline or something. Like it's impossible for somebody with, a GPA that low, to rise where I stand today. But that's where I'm at. But let me tell you something, let me tell you folks about a GPA. Excuse me. It's not a destiny. It isn't. It's not a destiny. It's a system's expectation. It's not your ceiling. And the label they gave me, this is what I want to talk to teenagers about. The label that they try to give you with these numbers, don't allow that to define you. Do not allow that to define you. Yes, you should do the very best you can in school. I'm all with that. But look at me. I made mistakes, and look at where I'm at today. So do not let that label define you as a teenager. It was not a prophecy. It wasn't prophetic because I landed where I'm at right now. See, let me say this. Nobody tells you what it feels like to walk into school knowing you're already counted out. The teachers, they kind of look at you funny. And this is why, as an educator right now, I always never count out a student. It gets very difficult. I'm going to say that again. It gets very difficult, but I never count out a student. But knowing that, your educational file says, you're not going to do well, or your future looks dim on paper, with the inside, on the inside, you're burning with potential. I'm going to tell you this. When I graduated high school, my father and my mother as well, God rest her soul, she's deceased. But my father basically gave me 3 options. And my father was a genuine driving force with my success for today, as well as my mother. And I really wish he was here to see where I'm at today, but we'll get into that later. But he basically gave me a couple of choices. He said, you're either going to go to the military, you're either going to get a job, or you're going to go to college. And I knew I could do the work. It was just all about motivation. And he didn't make a big deal out of me graduating high school because he was like, you're supposed to do that. And so I went to college, and college saved my life. And that is another episode for another day, because without my HBCU, shout out to HBCUs. Without that, I don't know where I would be today. But, that is where, thankfully, I had that support system. And that is what I need to espouse to the adults. You must be that support system to those students or those trouble students that we talk about. But that was part of my journey. I had, despite the things that I were going through, some of the personal things that I were going through, I had that support system. But let me say this, though. Either I had to make a decision, and that's part of the decision that my father kind of gave me, you know what I'm saying? Either I let the world define who I was, or I'm going to define myself. Let me say this again to young people. Do not let the world define who you are. You will go define yourself. Do not let the world tell you that you're a thug. Do not let the world tell you that you're not smart. Do not let the world tell you that you can't do anything. Do not let the world tell you that you can't read, that you can't write, that you can't build a business, that you can't be the president of the United States of America. You can do whatever you want to do, especially now, because with all of this information that's everywhere. Do not let the world define you. You go out and define yourself. And that's kind of what I had to do. And I chose the second one. I climbed from that 1.69, not because the path was easy, folks, but because I was tired of people telling me who I wasn't. You got to remember, when I was scraped out of high school and I started college, I felt I probably had low self-esteem. Like I was a loser. Not a loser, but I couldn't do it. And that's when my father came in and he kind of helped me and said, hey, you got to do what you got to do here. And that is where I really, really honed in. And I'll say that that first year of college really, really helped me. And I did well. But, again, I was tired of letting numbers decide my worth. I was tired of being treated like potential was optional instead of God-given, And so eventually, I went to college, then I went to another college, then I got my master's and then another master's. And, with grit and resilience, I am where I am today. And so today, as I stand as a Black man in education with all of these degrees and administrator and everything that I've been through in education, education is not for the weak. Let me say that. And as a black man, and as black educators, we got a whole story to tell. And educators in general, this is what I want to say as well. Just because I may focus on African American educators, I'm talking to educators in general. Because we know people will say, oh, well, you're making it a race thing. No, I'm making a reality. I love educators in general. But in reality, for me, I'm speaking to, the struggles that I have had. This has been particularly rough for me. But, this right here for me, and for me creating this platform, this, for me, folks, this isn't this episode, this podcast, this journey that I'm on right now. This isn't about me. This is about every student who has been underestimated. Every educator who sees more in kids than the world sees in them, every black child who's been labeled, every child in general who's been labeled before they've been loved, every young person who's brilliant, has a lot of potential but not believed in. And I'm telling y'all, this is part of the reason why the Truth Meter was born. Not as a podcast, not as a platform, but this is going to be a counter narrative, just like me being black man, 3 degrees, 2 licenses, maybe 3 licenses. No, probably going to be 3 licenses. Successful is a counter narrative to what some people believe and say for our culture. A person like me, I am the example for a lot of these students and these kids, black or white, Haitian, Hispanic, whoever. I am a role model. And that's a big responsibility for me, trust me. But, it's a challenge to the lies. We are a spotlight for the truth, y'all. Because that is why I named my podcast The Truth Meter, because we want to not only be a counter narrative, but we want to speak truth to power. I talk about speaking truth to power. I want to get off the subject here, but we have to speak truth to power on the lies that are told about us, students, our culture, African Americans, a lot of things that are attacking public education. This will be a place where our stories get told with dignity, clarity, and power. And then the Truth Meter is going to be bigger than commentary, bigger than media, bigger than entertainment. It's a movement. It's a movement built on truth-telling, narrative shifting, culture elevating, and we're going to empower our community. Listen, folks, this journey that I went on, it was compelling, it's my life, and I am humble, and I am humble to share it with you all. But make no mistake, there were a lot of potholes, a lot of things that occurred, a lot of barriers that occurred that I had to overcome in that journey. And this is just the 1.69 that I had to overcome. That is what I had to overcome, the 1.69, folks. And the part about, I had to circle back to my HBC, the HBCU back then that I went to, shout out Central State University, that's where I went to school at. They admitted everybody. They didn't go by GPAs like they go, for instance, if you have believe it's a 2.3 or 2.2, whatever. If you don't have that, you can't get admitted. I obviously was on probation, but they believed in me. I always will give it up for Central State University, regardless what people say about them. And they changed my life. And so 1.69, folks, it definitely has, that number has a compelling, let me just say this, it sticks out in my brain. 1.69, it is a driving force in everything that I do. It's a motivating force in everything that I do. We want to, listen, Part of this episode is not only because of the journey, because of me and everything that I've accomplished, but we want to be a medium. You know, obviously we're not controlled by any corporations or politics or anything, you know, of that nature. You know, we want to help our community. We want to help students. You know, we just not only do we want to inform, but we want to have a platform that ignites change. So I just want to leave you all with this. If I can have a 1.69 GPA and it can rise into leadership, I can earn my degrees, my licenses, I could serve my community, I could build a media company dedicated to telling the truth, then imagine what you all can do when you refuse to let the world limit your brilliance. Your story, folks, don't end where you struggle. You know, your story begins where you decide to rise. And, you know, if you're still listening to this right now thinking you can't make it, I've been there. The truth is your setback might just be your setup for greatness, but only if you do the work and stay the course. You got to stay the course. Oh, see, got to stay the course. I'm not editing that out, but you got to stay the course. So, you know, here's my conviction and invitation and my call to action to you all. You know, if you're a student, believe in your comeback story because it's being written right now. Don't allow nobody, like I said earlier, to define you. You define yourself. You write your story. Don't allow nobody, again, nobody to tell you what you can and cannot do. If you're an educator, this is the part that I need you all to do. See the brilliance in our students, please, even when the data doesn't. I'm going to say this one more time. See the brilliance in our students, even when the data doesn't. That's a whole nother conversation because what they are doing in regards to that is criminal. I'm going to get into that at another episode. If you're a community leader or parent, keep the fire lit. You know, our young people need to see success and they need to see our scars as well. They need to see mentors. They need to see good leadership. Please, that is important. They don't need to see no more people out doing what they do in the streets. They got enough of that. They got enough of that on social media, rappers, whatever. They need as many positive role models. And there are a lot of positive role models and mentors out there that are doing great things that I think that is not being talked about. And that is why I'm here. I came from being a 1.69 reject to where I'm at. Share this episode with someone who's on their journey from doubt, destiny. And remember, follow the Truth Meter podcast on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you get your truth. At the Truth Meter, we just don't talk about success, folks. We measure the journey. I'm your boy, T. Mac. Peace and blessing.